"You were always just the operator," Mom said. And just like that, it all made sense. I knew something was wrong the moment the attorney locked the conference room door. Not just closed it, locked it. Click. Like we were all suspects in some slow, dull heist, and someone needed to control the room. Harold Miles had built a logistics empire from a single battered diesel rig in 1974, but he always said it was the details that made or broke the load. Even now, 2 weeks dead, he was still teaching us. "Let's begin," said Mr. Desmond, with that paper-thin voice of a man who spent more time with ledgers than people. My mother, Lorraine, perched on the leather chair beside me like a snow queen made of Chanel and cold coffee. My brother Grant swaggered in late, still wearing his black leather jacket and sunglasses like he'd just strolled in from a casino parking lot, which, frankly, he probably had. And me? I sat dead center, folder in my lap, hair pulled back, not a smudge on my blouse. I'd buried Dad, soothed clients, and finalized the Q3 reports, all in the same 10-day window. I'd also been the one who made sure the warehouse flags flew at half-mast. 30 years I gave that company, 25 as COO. I'd watched our fleet grow from 11 trucks to 278, managed $83 million in annual revenue, kept 5 distribution hubs humming through COVID, inflation, and 2 fuel crises. Payroll ran $412,000 per week, and I balanced it to the cent. So yes, I expected a fair split, not just because it was just, but because it was smart. Instead, Desmond cleared his throat and read, "To my beloved wife, Lorraine Miles, I leave our primary residence in Grosse Pointe and its contents, valued at $3.7 million. Also, the vacation home in Traverse City, including all furniture and watercraft." Fine. That was expected. "To my daughter, Sabrina Miles, I leave my vintage record collection and one-time disbursement of $250,000 to be paid from the estate." That was odd. Then he looked up, glasses sliding halfway down his nose, and said calmly, "And to my son, Grant Harold Miles, I bequeath controlling interest in Miles Transport Group, including all associated assets, properties, subsidiaries, and the remainder of the family trust, effective immediately." Just like that. I felt the shift in the room, like a trailer hitch snapping free at 70 miles an hour, the whole thing tilting dangerously off course. Grant leaned back in his chair and smiled like he'd just hit a royal flush. He rubbed his chin, probably thinking about all the bar tabs he could pay off or what his first CEO speech would sound like. "That's not right," I said calmly, always calmly. "The business wasn't in Dad's hands the past 8 years. I've been COO since 2015. He was semi-retired." Desmond blinked. "Your father never updated the ownership records after your title change. The trust states Grant is to assume control as firstborn." I turned to my mother. "You knew about this?" Her lips barely moved. "You were always just the operator, Sabrina. The one who ran things. Grant is the name. The legacy, I can't explain what that felt like. Imagine carrying a house on your back for 3 decades. Then the moment you set it down, someone else claims it, and they never even helped with the bricks." Grant had been gone for 12 years. After college, he left to find himself in Miami, then Vegas, then back home, 2 marriages and 1 bankruptcy later. He dropped into company meetings maybe twice a year, always hungover, always full of half-baked ideas about automation or rebranding for a younger clientele. He never answered emails, never stayed past lunch. He once said out loud, in front of the entire board, "Supply chain just means trucks show up on time, right? That man was now the owner of a multi-million-dollar operation with over 600 employees, 5 facilities, and a carefully negotiated union contract I'd worked 18 months to finalize. My hand curled around the chair arm. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just nodded and stood. The chair's squeak was the loudest sound in the room. I walked out without touching the envelope Desmond tried to hand me. No one followed. The sky outside was that dull pewter gray the Midwest does so well, somewhere between steel and sorrow. My car was parked neatly in the 3rd spot, the one Harold always called the operator's space. I slid behind the wheel and sat for a long moment. Dad had always loved systems, processes. "It's not the horsepower," he used to say. "It's the routing that wins wars." But in the end, he routed everything to the wrong damn terminal. By that weekend, the news was official. Grant Miles was CEO of Miles Transport Group, and the local business journals were calling it a seamless family transition. I laughed out loud at that one. Seamless? The man couldn't organize his own sock drawer. I knew what came next. He'd start making calls, shuffling people, cutting corners. He'd want to scale fast, modernize, bring in outside visionaries. And sure enough, by Monday morning, there was a new receptionist. Then 2 more guys from his poker night showed up in IT. Someone emailed me asking where to find the monthly invoice dashboard and CC'd the new operations director. I nearly bit through my coffee mug, but I didn't fight. Not yet, because I'd already been preparing for something like this, quietly, methodically, like I did everything else. You see, 2 years ago, during a merger that almost bankrupted us, Grant's bright idea, by the way, I had a hunch that one day I'd need a contingency. So I registered a new company, Trueline Logistics, named it after the first hand-drawn routing map Dad and I made together when I was 17. I opened a private bank account, leased a modest office space 2 towns over. Nothing flashy. And then I waited. Now, I started gathering. Quietly. Carefully. I pulled vendor records, employee logs, fuel invoices. Everything Dad and I had built with care. I printed my own payroll ledgers, cross-referenced them against the board's approvals. I highlighted every deal I'd salvaged, every client I'd rescued, every warehouse I'd personally kept from foreclosure. It was all there, proof in numbers. The quiet fingerprints of a woman who had kept a logistics empire afloat through sheer force of discipline and damned good math. But I wasn't planning a speech. I wasn't planning a fight. I was planning an exit, a clean one. Because the truth was, I didn't want the Miles name anymore. I wanted my own. And soon, they would learn what it meant to lose the person who kept the wheels turning. But for now, I watched them spin. And I smiled. I didn't quit right away. That's something folks never understand. When a storm hits, you don't just drop the wheel and leap overboard. You tighten the straps, you listen, you watch the water, you wait. And Grant? He was the storm. His first week as CEO, he changed the office coffee from fair trade to a celebrity blend he found on Instagram. Cost the company $1,800 a month. Said it was about team morale. By week 2, he'd rebranded the employee newsletter with a new slogan, "Let's drive greatness," trademarked, with a little trademark symbol and everything. He replaced the Miles Transport crest, the one my father designed in the 80s, with the eagle perched over a gear wheel, with a gradient logo that looked like a tech startup trying too hard. I sat through his first board presentation and nearly swallowed my own tongue. He used phrases like truck-to-table velocity and synergy scaling through loyalty funnels. I counted 5 spelling errors on his title slide. One was the word logistics. And then came the hiring. Grant brought in Jimmy Haynes as head of procurement. Jimmy, who once got so drunk on a company retreat, he mistook a shipping container for a bathroom. He also owed Grant nearly $40,000 in poker debt. Next came Marcus Vale, an old fraternity brother turned strategy consultant. Marcus's last job? Selling crypto seminars out of a strip mall near Dayton. Now he was Senior VP of Operational Synergies. And suddenly, we were spending $2.2 million on a fleet innovation audit that involved drone photos and LED strip lights for the cabs. I said nothing. Not yet. But every time one of Grant's buddies strutted through the warehouse wearing a brand new blazer and asking how forklifts worked, I opened another folder in my personal archive. Because I'd seen this pattern before, just not from my family. You know what broke me? Not the money, not even the disrespect. It was the new employee portal Grant had built. I logged in one morning to pull attendance data and noticed something strange in the org chart. My name was gone. Just gone. No COO. No department reports. Not even an assistant. I'd been reclassified as advisor. I wasn't demoted. I was erased. When I asked about it, Grant blinked like I was overreacting. "It's just a title thing," he said, chewing on some overpriced jerky Marcus had brought in as a healthy snack initiative. "You're still super valuable. Just more behind the scenes now." Behind the scenes? I kept that company solvent during the worst freight year in a generation. When the pandemic gutted shipping, I renegotiated 14 contracts, paused 2 leases, and found alternate fuel suppliers in under 48 hours. I saved us $7.6 million in Q2 of 2020 alone. Behind the scenes? But fine. Let him play emperor. I'd already started building my war chest. The first move was payroll. I pulled records going back 5 years. Every bonus, every retroactive raise, every off-cycle draw. Grant had been pulling a consulting stipend for years, roughly $8,500 per month, even while in Miami. He'd also billed the company for fleet visits that aligned perfectly with spring break in Cancun. I copied every file onto a hard drive, not the cloud, not a USB, a physical hard drive I kept in a fireproof safe behind the water heater in my basement. That's the kind of woman I am. Next, I turned to vendor contracts. I'd always insisted we keep backup copies, paper and PDF, of every major service agreement, because trucking is a paper game. If it's not written, signed, and stapled in triplicate, it doesn't exist. That's the rule. So when Grant started trying to renegotiate warehouse leases without understanding property taxes, I had the originals. When he offered a 20% discount to a mega retailer for exposure, I had the original rate sheets, signed and sealed. Then came the fuel hedges. During COVID, fuel prices swung so wildly you could feel it in your bones. But I'd struck side agreements with 2 Midwest suppliers, sealed in handshakes and small print, locking in fixed rates for our diesel through 2026. Those deals were buried deep in Dad's side folders, handwritten notes with initials and quiet language like honor in hardship. I had those too. Meanwhile, Grant was signing flashy deals with eco-fuel startups that couldn't deliver a single gallon on time. Drivers were calling in angry. Trucks sat idle for hours. One Tuesday, dispatch rang me in a panic because 3 rigs were stranded outside Gary, Indiana, with empty tanks and no fuel cards. I made a few quiet calls. The trucks got moving. But I added that day to the ledger. I wasn't just keeping track of what he ruined. I was keeping track of what I'd saved. Week after week, I logged my own quiet interventions, rerouted freight, smoothed out payroll mishaps, corrected invoices that would have triggered audits. I became the company's silent failsafe. And that's when I saw it clearly. I was the only thing standing between Grant and disaster, and I was done saving him. One night, around 11 p.m., I sat in my home office, papers spread around like a detective's corkboard, a glass of wine in my hand, but I hadn't touched it. I looked at the mess and whispered out loud, "He doesn't even know what he inherited." Because that's the tragedy of it all. He didn't understand what made Miles' transport work. It wasn't the name. It wasn't the fleet. It wasn't the logo or the website or his absurd motivational posters. It was the systems, the people, the back-end process maps I built from scratch, the cross-state compliance documents I personally filed every year, the union relationships I cultivated with actual lunches and actual listening, the emergency protocols, the winter route diversions, the contracts timed to seasonal shifts. He thought he inherited a goose that laid golden eggs, but I knew where the feed came from, and I had all the receipts. So I started making calls, not loudly, not all at once. I called Carla over at North Point Retail. We'd shared a table at the annual logistics summit for the last 6 years. I asked how she was finding Grant's new incentive pricing. She laughed and said, "We're already looking elsewhere. Let me know if you ever go independent." I smiled. I just might. I called Roman at the union, quietly, privately, told him to flag any suspicious changes to driver comp packages. I spoke to 2 former warehouse supervisors who'd left because of culture changes, asked if they'd be open to a different opportunity. And finally, I called my banker. "Remember that LLC I opened? Trueline." "Yes, ma'am." "I'd like to activate the credit line and get a business card printer on standby." That was the beginning of the end, though they didn't know it yet. Let Grant enjoy his poker buddies and his velvet couches. Let my mother sip her wine and believe the crown stayed with the sun. Let them smile at me across boardroom tables like I was some pitiful spinster clinging to spreadsheets. Because the truth? I wasn't clinging. I was collecting. And when the moment came, I'd pull the cord and walk away, and they'd hear the silence of an engine gone cold. The day I handed in my resignation, it was raining so hard the front lot flooded ankle deep. I remember standing there for a minute before stepping inside, letting the cold water soak into my shoes. There's something cleansing about that kind of chill. It wakes your bones. I wore navy slacks, a crisp white blouse, and the same wool coat I'd worn the day Dad gave me the title of COO. I remember how he'd patted my shoulder that day and said, "You're the engine now. Don't let it stall." That was 15 years ago. Now, as I walked into Grant's office, he'd remodeled it with glass walls and a neon wall art that read, "Move fast or die." I carried a plain envelope and a USB stick. He didn't look up when I entered, just muttered, "Give me a sec," while he typed something into Slack with those acrylic-tipped fingers he'd recently started getting manicured. Said it was about executive presence. I placed the envelope on the desk. He finally glanced at it. "What's this?" "My resignation," I said. He blinked, then smiled like I'd handed him a Sudoku puzzle. "You're kidding." "No." "You're seriously quitting?" "I'm not quitting, Grant. I'm removing myself from the wreckage." He laughed. Loud, performative. "Wow. Okay, well, best of luck. No hard feelings." "No," I said calmly. "None." He never asked about the USB. The truth is, I'd already left weeks before that moment. Not physically. Physically, I was still walking the warehouse, still smiling at the drivers, still answering midnight calls when the winter storms came early. But emotionally, mentally, I'd built my parachute, and it was already halfway to the sky. Trueline Logistics had been nothing more than a dormant LLC for 2 years, something I opened as a backup when COVID hit, just in case our bankers got cold feet or the union froze over wage talks. A contingency plan. A skeleton. Now it had muscle. By the time I left Grant Co., Trueline had signed non-disclosure MOUs with 7 of our biggest clients, including North Point Retail, Grayson Farm Co-op, and Midstate Medical Supply, which had 3-year freight contracts valued at over $12.4 million combined. How? Because they trusted me, not the logo, not the office, me. I was the one who called at midnight when the snow buried their pallets. I was the one who rerouted ventilators during the PPE crunch of 2020. I was the one who remembered birthdays, sent condolence flowers, and checked in when their kids got sick. People don't stay with companies. They stay with people. 3 days after I resigned, the cracks widened. Marcus, the crypto bro turned logistics VP, sent out a mass email titled "A New Era of Freight." It promised 24-hour deliveries, flexible pricing, and something called a fleet influencer program. Within 24 hours, 4 of our key clients pulled their next quarter shipments. I watched from the outside as the dominoes fell. First came the bounced payments. A major supplier hadn't been paid for diesel in 2 weeks. Their lawyer sent a demand letter. Then, 2 dispatchers walked out after Grant tried to cut their overtime and replace it with team-building retreats. Then came the rumors, circulating through truck stops, trade channels, and industry blogs. Miles Transport isn't paying on time. Miles let go of their finance lead. Sabrina's out. Sabrina's gone. And just like that, the phones at Trueline started ringing. Carla from North Point was the first to call. "Tell me you've got capacity in Q3. I told her I did." "What kind of trucks?" "Same as always, just better managed." "Your name's still on the paperwork?" "Everywhere that matters," I said. She sent a retainer within the hour. Then came Midstate Medical, then Silver Grove's distribution, then a handful of small but steady regional haulers who'd once been squeezed by Grant's volume pricing model. They came to Trueline with gratitude and a kind of fierce loyalty I hadn't expected. Within 2 weeks, we had $3.8 million in scheduled shipments, and that was just initial. And yet, what I remember most about that time isn't the money. It was walking into the new office space, just a converted floor above a shuttered steel mill, and hearing the hum of printers, the ring of phones, the laughter of drivers who actually felt seen again. We didn't have fancy couches, no LED art, no branded mugs. We had warmth, and we had momentum. Then, on a Thursday, my mother called. No greeting, just, "Why would you do this to your brother?" I paused. Took a breath. "Do what exactly?" "You're poaching clients. You're tearing this family apart." I stood at the window of my new office, looking out at a snow-covered loading dock we'd cleared ourselves with borrowed shovels. "No, Mom. I'm just not catching him when he falls anymore." She huffed. "You always were jealous of him." I laughed. Quiet, dry. Jealous of what? His golf swing? His poker debt? There was a long pause. "He's your brother. And I gave him $1 billion blueprint, and he used it to wipe his hands." I could hear the clink of her wine glass on the other end. "Your father would be ashamed." That cut. But not the way she intended, because I knew the truth. I'd kept my father's legacy alive longer than anyone else, and I knew, deep in my bones, that he would have been proud of what I'd done. "Maybe," I said, "but at least I earned my place at the table." And I hung up. That Friday, I got word that Grant Co. had missed payroll. For the first time in 42 years. Drivers stood outside the building in the snow, trying to cash checks that bounced. Union reps called emergency meetings. Vendors pulled out of contracts. Insurance lapsed. And Grant? He posted a video on LinkedIn, standing in front of a fleet truck, wearing a branded hoodie, talking about unexpected turbulence and growth opportunities. The comments shredded him. "Where's Sabrina? Didn't she build this place? Maybe let the adult run things again." It was glorious. It was tragic. It was exactly what I knew would happen. The next Monday, Marcus showed up at Trueline. Hair slicked back. Coat 3 sizes too expensive. A thumb drive in hand and a weak smile on his face. "Hey," he said. "So, any chance you're hiring?" I didn't answer right away. Just looked at the framed photo of my old team on the wall. Me, Dad, the drivers, the mechanics, all standing in front of the first truck we ever bought outright. And I said, "We are. Entry level. Starting wage. Full benefits after 90 days. He didn't take it, but he heard it, and that was enough. Because this wasn't just revenge. This was restoration. Of dignity. Of order. Of truth. They thought they could take everything from me and walk away untouched. But I was never just an operator. I was the operator who built the machine. And now I owned the switch. The first public sign of collapse came on a Tuesday. That morning, WRAK 92.3, the regional AM talk station, ran a 30-second segment during the commuter hour. Just a quiet, gravel-voiced update tucked between the grain futures and the school closings. Reports say Miles Transport missed its second payroll cycle. Sources indicate unpaid vendors and shipment delays. More at noon. I was drinking black coffee from a chipped mug when I heard it. A small smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Because I knew what that meant. It meant the rot had finally surfaced, and the whole Midwest was about to smell it. Inside Grant Co., panic was spiraling. Dispatchers were ghosting shifts. Account managers couldn't reach their clients. The server went down for a full day after Grant fired the IT manager and tried to outsource the back end to a friend's cousin who knew a guy. Vendors began holding shipments unless paid in full up front. Drivers started leaving their keys on desks. And Grant? He held a town hall, wore a blazer over a t-shirt, spoke into a rented microphone. "Let's all just stay positive, okay? We're pivoting. This is a growth phase." I got the video from a friend in HR. You could hear the silence in the room louder than his words. He blamed the union first, said they were sabotaging innovation. Then it was the accountants. They're not used to fast-paced scaling. Then the drivers. They're old school, resistant to change. Never once did he mention the fact that he'd taken a debt-free, cash-rich operation with a 96% client retention rate and turned it into a hemorrhaging liability in under 5 months. Never once did he say the word Sabrina. But he didn't have to. Everyone else was saying it for him. Trueline, meanwhile, had entered a different orbit. By late spring, we'd signed exclusivity contracts with 12 major clients, covering over $18 million in annual freight across 3 states. We acquired a small carrier in Indiana and a warehouse in Peoria. We went from 20 to 70 employees in 3 months. And we did it quietly. We didn't buy Super Bowl ads. We didn't launch flashy campaigns. We just showed up, did the work, kept our promises, and while Grant Co. was issuing apology emails and laying off entire departments, we were onboarding their best people, mechanics, dispatchers, drivers who'd built the muscle of the business but were never allowed to flex it. I made sure they came in with full benefits, proper onboarding, and the same pay scale I'd fought for back when Dad was still around. One of the drivers, Big Kenny, shook my hand on his first day and said, "Feels like coming home, to a house that's finally clean." That one stuck with me. Then came the expose. A local reporter, Tanya, from the Industrial Daily, had been tipped off by a disgruntled former admin. She ran a 3-page feature with the headline, "From Freight Titan to Failing Startup, The Fall of Miles Transport." She had everything. Grant's misuse of company credit, VIP box at the Bears game, a $3,400 espresso machine for his brainstorm room, the hiring of unqualified friends, the firing of senior staff who questioned his math, and a particularly damning email where he referred to the dispatch team as dinosaurs with clipboards. The piece closed with this line: "Sources say the heart of Miles Transport left the day Sabrina Miles walked out the door." My phone didn't stop ringing for 2 days. Then Mom called again. Different tone this time. No wine haze, just clipped words. "Your brother's struggling." "Yes," I said. "He is. He's overwhelmed. He might be ready to talk." "About what?" "Help. Advice. Payroll." There was a pause. "You don't sound surprised." "I'm not." He said maybe you could consult." That word. Consult. Like I was some outsider. Like I hadn't been the one who kept the lights on while Grant was in Tulum finding himself. I let the silence stretch. He doesn't need a consultant, Mom. He needs a mirror. Grant Co's decline sped up after that. Insurance carriers dropped them. 2 clients filed breach of contract. A third demanded immediate restitution after a shipment of climate-sensitive medical supplies sat in a hot warehouse for 72 hours. Credit lines were slashed. Equipment repossessed. One of the trucks got booted in a Walmart parking lot because the company card declined during fueling. Through it all, Grant kept posting motivational quotes on LinkedIn. Leadership is about vision. Sometimes failure is just feedback in disguise. The comments turned savage. Vision without execution is hallucination. Feedback? You owe me $14,000. Bring back Sabrina. By the start of summer, Trueline was the only certified vendor left on the state's emergency logistics list. We handled storm response, vaccine deliveries, school supply chains for 6 districts. We were the infrastructure now, and I wasn't doing it for revenge anymore. I was doing it for the ones who'd been ignored. People like Frances in billing, who got laid off after 23 years and cried when I gave her an offer, or Don, the night shift mechanic, who brought me donuts on his first day because he said, "I just want to say thanks before I get greasy." This wasn't a business anymore. It was a home for the exiled, a place of repair. I heard Grant sold the lake house. He's driving a used Acura now, living in a rental west of town. A former HR rep told me he tried to start a podcast, made it 3 episodes in before it fizzled. The last episode was titled, "What They Don't Teach You About Inheritance." I didn't listen. I didn't need to. Because when a building collapses, you don't run back inside to salvage the furniture. You build something better, stronger, quieter. And this time, you lay the foundation yourself. The old office looked smaller now, not because anything had changed, but because I had. The ceilings didn't stretch as high. The heavy oak desk no longer felt imposing. The walls, once lined with awards and maps and framed headlines, stood bare, waiting for their next chapter. I didn't redecorate right away. Instead, I left one thing where it was, the framed black and white photo of my father, Harold Miles. He was about 40 in the picture, sleeves rolled, hands on his hips, a cigarette balanced just so. He had that look in his eye, equal parts exhaustion and resolve. I set it on the shelf behind me, just above my shoulder. He could watch. That felt right. The building had once been the heartbeat of Miles Transport. Now, it was the headquarters of Trueline Logistics. Same address, new blood. The first day we opened our doors under the new name, Frances from billing brought in a bundt cake shaped like a steering wheel. She said it was for good luck and safe travels. And that's exactly what we had. We weren't flashy, But we were sharp. We hired smart, we trained harder, and we outpaced every prediction. Within 6 months, we were projected to hit $25 million in annual contracts. Drivers from 5 states were requesting to transfer in. A national retailer offered us a preferred partner deal, and I turned it down. Not because we weren't ready, but because we were building something bigger than their offer. We were building dignity into every shipment, stability into every paycheck, and truth into every signature I signed. And then, one afternoon, the phone rang. It was my mother. I hadn't heard her voice in weeks. It was thin, not the wine-soaked smugness from before, just brittle. "Sabrina, I need to talk to you. I'm listening. Your brother, Grant. He's in trouble. I'm aware. No, I mean, it's bad. They're 2 weeks behind on payroll. His wife left. The bank's threatening to call the note on the house." I said nothing, just watched the dust float in the beam of light across my office. "He's asking if you'd consider helping, just a loan, to cover salaries until he finds a buyer." "He doesn't need a loan, Mom." "Then what does he need?" I let the silence settle before I answered. "A lesson." She didn't speak. I heard a soft exhale. Maybe a sob, maybe not. "We raised you both the same, you know." I almost laughed. "No, Mom. You raised a son to inherit and a daughter to assist. But I built this. You just never looked long enough to see it." "So that's it?" "Not quite." I took a breath, kept my voice calm. "Tell Grant to send a resume." "A resume? We're hiring. Entry level. Local routes only. He'll need a CDL and 2 years of clean logs." Click. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't pour champagne or dance in my office. I just walked to the window and watched the trucks line up outside. 15 of them. Clean white trailers, chrome gleaming, drivers laughing with clipboards in hand. We were moving. We were growing. And we were doing it without bitterness, without noise, and without men like Grant. Just people who showed up, worked hard, told the truth. People like me. I sat down at my desk, looked at my father's photo. He once told me, "The real power's not in the office. It's in who keeps the lights on." I keep the lights on now, and I'm never handing over the switch again. The end. If this story spoke to you, if you felt seen, satisfied, or even just a little fired up, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment sharing what part hit you hardest, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. We've got so much more to tell, and you won't want to miss a single one.